The Czech capital, Prague, regularly appears on two global shortlists, World's Most Beautiful Cities and, not coincidentally, World's Most Visited Cities. Prague escaped almost entirely the destructive bombings of World War II, and today its 1.2 million people live surrounded by an encyclopedia of glorious architecture stretching back 7 centuries. It has long been a magnet for American tourists.
Americký hosty mám velice rád, jsou to dobrý hosti.
I like Americans, says this waiter. They are really very good guests. They know what to eat and what to drink. But, he says, there are less and less of them here. The absence of Americans was nowhere clearer than at a couple of Prague's self-declared American bars, where the accents of the customers were mostly British and Australian, with a smattering of non-English-speaking Europeans. A quartet of American students at Prague's famous film academy confirmed they don't see a lot of their countrymen, and what they've heard about America from the locals has tended to be complaints about the Bush administration and the war in Iraq. I think it's sad, says this shopkeeper. I'm not angry at Americans because it's a matter of the government, not the people. At this laundry, the subject of Americans in Prague or in general excited little response. But this lady in her pet supply store summed up her feelings with the ultimate Czech put-down. In my opinion, she says, the Americans and the Russians are just the same. Remember, it was the Russians who snuffed out Czech democracy in 1948. And it was Soviet tanks which crushed the 1968 Prague Spring attempt to create socialism with a human face.
And so it drops again after 2000. Is this 2006?
One of Prague's top political analysts says the comparisons we heard mirror the results of his polls, taken before this summer's Russian invasion of Georgia.
The evaluation of the Americans and the American government is a bit different. The Americans are evaluated relatively well, whereas George W. Bush scores a bit worse than Vladimir Putin. It's paradoxical given our historical experience.
For many Czechs, their opinion of America and Americans has been shaped by a more recent controversy that cuts much closer to home. It's the idea of putting a radar control base for a U.S. NATO anti-missile defense system in this rural area, only about an hour's drive outside Prague. Even before the Russian tanks rolled into Georgia this summer, apprehension was widespread among Czechs about Russian rage against the proposed anti-missile system. In the village of Trokovec, close to the proposed radar station, Ivana Hoška says most of her neighbors are against it. It's been very controversial here, she says. The village is split in two. But she is strongly for it. I'd rather have the Americans here than the Russians, she said. Whenever this country needed help, the Americans came, but when the Russians were here, they brought only death. And overall, says Hartl, there is a good political reason why the Czech government is comfortable about backing the missile system. Over the years, Hartl's polls have shown, Czechs and Americans subscribe to the same values.
People appreciate such values as freedom, democracy, open market, open society, free market, and so on. It still holds strong.
I'm Dave Marish for World Focus in Prague.